Yo, 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 what is going on, RoK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are going to be touching on what I think is probably one of the most important topics in Kingdom Builders and in Rise of Kingdoms that probably has never really ever been talked about. And if you're watching this video for the first time, I am probably going to Jimmy Neutron brain blast your entire life. And for those of you who are vets, if you are familiar with these things again, or even if you're just going to notice and catch on as I explain, it is still going to be very enlightening because it's really going to talk about an underlying issue that essentially, I don't want to say plagues kingdom builders, but it is something to be cognizant of, and more importantly, understand why it happens, how it can affect your kingdom long term to be as sustainable and long lasting as possible, and then what are some solutions that we can think of, and how does this also lastly affect ROK's bottom line. So I'm going to try and do my best to now actually make sure I remember to touch on each of those points because it sounded really good coming out. Before we get started officially, as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell, and of course, join the Discord as well to be a part of our conversation. Link in the description / pin comment below. All right, so the first one that we're going to touch on is, and this is kind of the overarching point for the video, is why is it that kingdoms will go down this path of a mega alliance hierarchy type structure that you can see played out on the leaderboards. And just to give you an example, we're actually going to take a look at 8 kingdoms just so I can show you, and I'm going to run through these points pretty quick just so we can go through each of the kingdoms. But what I'm talking about is when you're looking at a leaderboard and you see here that it's, you know, again, top down, right? Not super close in power. You look at the margin, you look at the gap between 1 and 6, and you're looking at, 240, 242, right? That's a pretty big margin between 1 and 6. And what happens is that there's this ladder effect that is created in kingdoms that are just starting off when you have alliances that are breaking out in power. Players, for the most part, will gradually like to move up this ladder, right? And essentially moving up the leaderboard. So they'll try to apply and get into the top alliance, number 2 alliance, number 3 alliance, right? And usually in every single kingdom, this will happen 100% of the time. You're going to have a portion, however many people this may be, a portion of players that will always want to climb the ranks. And they'll always want to just be a part of the number 1 alliance. And if they can't get into number 1, they'll try to get in number 2. If they can't get into a top alliance, then sometimes they'll do whatever it may be. Maybe they'll restart. Maybe they'll stop playing. Maybe maybe a small percentage of them will be okay. Maybe they'll wait for the cap to increase and then apply and try and get in. Again, this applies to a portion of players. However, the challenge with this is that when you factor in how the ladder effect plays out to kingdoms, right, long term, and now I want to give you an example, right, before I kind of really hammer away on these points, is I'm going to give you an example of an older kingdom, right? So now, right, here's an example of, some kingdoms that are there. Let me show you, I'm just going to pick one at random. Let's do this. Let's do 1804. Right, let's pick 1804 at random. We're going to load in, and I'm going to show you how, and we'll take a look maybe at one other older kingdom, right, just to kind of hammer this initial point. And then we'll get into what I feel are like the 3 to 4 big reasons on why this factors the way it does. Okay, and new opportunities store. Yeah, I don't really want to do new journey. We'll just do this, new opportunities. Okay, cool. Targeted. I don't want to do that. Home kingdom. Okay, there's the button. Cool. So I'm back here. Oh gosh, I have to go through this 1804. Okay, now we'll look at the boards. So again, this is probably a more direct example of a kingdom that probably isn't that right. Super active because you can tell they're kind of funneling in. This is like actually a really good example of a mega alliance hierarchy structure that kingdoms will all by default gradually head to. This is just more exacerbated because it's like you're basically piling in the 1% at the top. Or I should say, yeah, I guess the 1% at the top. So, but you can see how this plays out, right? Super wide gap, right? What is this, 10 billion at that point? So that's just one example. Let's look at one more. And let me see if I can do something a little older here than that. 14 here. Let's look at 1426. I'll just go into another random one here. And you can tell I'm doing this for the first time because it's showing up on with the new journey offers. So we'll go in.
Daddy,
We're gonna take a look. Yes.
that's a cookie.
In a little bit. You can have some fruit first, okay?
No.
And then I'll give you a cookie later. Okay?
I just have cool.
Sure.
I just have cereal.
Okay. Okay. Hang on. We can have a cookie later. How about we go get some fruit first? How about a banana, apple, or orange? Yeah. And then I'll give you cookie later. Okay? High five. For my love. Where's my love? Okay. I'll give you one later. Okay?
No.
Okay. Or not. Alrighty. With that being said, so adorable. All right. With that being said, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look here at 1426. Let's look at the ranks. And you can see here pretty much the same thing. Now, yes, these are random kingdoms that I'm picking just that I have accounts in. There's a lot of accounts I have. But you can see here that just from picking 2 random kingdoms, and we're going to show you as well how this also factors on the early stage. This is really where your kingdom, every single kingdom, is trending in, is to end up like this. And this does not necessarily mean that your kingdom, for the most part, is dead, or, hey, the kingdom can't do anything at all. There is still going to be an active player base in said kingdoms when, regardless of, how strong or how powerful they may be. However, this is the trend that, as I said, every kingdom is going in by default, right? Unless they do something to try and combat that outside of it. Now, yes, for some of the more well-known kingdoms, ones that might be, Imperium, or if they're working the way up the ranks, when you're doing a lot of recruitment through migration, that can help a lot when it comes to building up some of the other alliances. However, the challenge is that when you get to a state where the alliances are kind of running away in power, this can lead to a few things, and then I'll touch on the 3 to 4 big topics on why, on how some of the factors are that play into kingdoms going into this structure. One of the big things is that you lose out on player engagement. When you have alliances that are not balanced in power, the challenge then becomes you trying to motivate players that are not in the top alliances, and that can spread and fester like a cancer, because you will have players that will say, oh, well, I need to be in the top alliance, or there's just no point in me playing, or I need to be there because I need to play with active people, or I need to be there because they're doing forts all the time, whatever reason, or I need to be there because there's gold chests that are pouring out of the top alliances. And you'll hear probably every reason in the book. I just call them excuses. Though this will cause not only general player drop-off that it'll factor into and cause, it'll cause players to feel as though, and I'll give you a good example. Let's say you have a kingdom-wide event, and let me see if there's any here that are actually going on so I can give a really good one here. If you have a kingdom-wide event, which is, let's see here. Let's see if this shows no, it doesn't. This is just individual ranking. Oh, let me see if there's something here going on that shows an alliance ranking. Or the ruin. No. Okay, well, there's not one going on right now. But let's just say there was an alliance ranking event that was happening. And you were a part of an alliance, and let's say you've been in the kingdom for a little while, and these alliance versus alliance events that have an alliance ranking on them have happened quite a few times. And you've noticed as a player that you are in an alliance that is not consistently winning or not having an opportunity to consistently win. You will most likely not overinvest your resources into that event. You may just do the bare minimum. And because of that, players, some will, however many, will feel as though because they're not in a position to win constant events in games or at least compete on an even playing field, that will factor into a loss of player engagement, of contributions, and their overall investments. And that can then factor into lowering their activity, not playing as much. Maybe they'll try and get into a higher ranked alliance, but they'll get denied and they won't be able to. I mean, there's a lot of different branches and roads that can play out from there. However, this is what happens when you get into a situation where you are just letting the alliance powers run away. you will set yourself up to be in this situation where over a period of time, if you do not, again, it's one of those things where pretty much 100% of the time, it's going to have the highest percentage chance to play out this way, like we just showed you from some older kingdoms. Now, while I'm explaining some of these things, some of the main factors that go into this, let's go ahead and we'll take a look at some of the other kingdoms now that are on this specific continent that we're going to be looking at, which is 2777 through 2784, right? So we did show you that. Now we're going to look at 78. And now let me briefly kind of start going into some of the main points, right? So one of the big factors for why kingdoms will play into the hands of already going down this path of mega alliance structuring is one, because of leaderboards, right? Everyone wants to compete. Everyone wants to initially try and work their way up the boards. And because of that, that plays into alliances doing things like, poaching, internal recruiting, attacking others. It could just be them powering up and accepting, trying to, say, hey, we're just going to collect all the spenders, right? I'm sure a lot of you have heard that before in kingdoms. And you look here at 78, very similar, right? You look at 1 to 6, power gap here is, what is this, 254, 280, right? So you're looking at almost 280 on a power gap. So again, wide margin. You can see it's already spreading that way. Now we'll look at 79. So outside of the rankings and the ladder effect, right, of people wanting to climb up, they want to get into a stronger alliance, then you have number 2, which is that nobody knows each other, right? Even if you're coming in with a jump group of a couple alliances, however many it may be, or none at all, you have to keep in mind that nobody knows each other, right? Specifically the leaders. The leaders do not know each other. So they don't know how the others are thinking. They don't know, do these leaders want, as an example, do they want to share territory? Do they just want to take province 1 or a province in zone 1 for themselves? Do they think that kill events should be free for all, for everyone? You should just be able to attack anyone's cities, right? Does one alliance feel like, no, we don't want city hits? Or a group of alliances feel like, no, we don't want to do city hits. Other groups say, no, city hits are okay. There are so many different ways of what an individual person can think for how they want to play out in the kingdom, for what they want to do, for how they want to operate, for how they want to work or not work with others. And the only way you can figure those things out is by asking, right? You have to get information and you have to communicate and discuss those things with leads. So because everyone starts off on this even playing field of not knowing each other, right, that's how you start running into problems when things happen in the kingdom and you're wondering why an alliance is doing this or doing that. And most of the time it's because, well, no one's really talked with one another. And then you have here, which is the next kingdom, and you look at from 1 to 6. Again, wide gap here, right? Almost 400, 150, right? This is almost 250 that you're seeing here on the gap. Same thing, right? Another kind of mega alliance structure that is factoring. Or I should say mega alliance power gapping. Now we'll look at 80, right? This will be the 4th kingdom. And what you're just basically going to notice is a consistent trend. This is what happens. And this is why I think this topic is so important to touch on, to really explain why this happens, what factors into it happening, and then how it can affect your kingdom in the long run. And then we'll talk about the importance of why doing things like power balancing and having a lot of high player retention actually helps the game and helps more kingdoms in the long run. So now we're going to look at 80. And again, same thing, right? 303, but a lower gap this time, right? So you got about 140, it looks like 141 gap, but still wide when you're looking at it from 1 to 6. However, I like this from 1 to 4 because this is closer. So this is actually better for me. And this is something that if I look at this, right, they have a 20 mil gap from 1 to 4. This is really good. Even 5 isn't too far away as well. So this is actually a pretty decent job here. But again, still noticing that there is a little bit of a gap, just not as much as some of the other kingdoms. Given, right, it's still, we're only around a month in for these. So now we'll look at the 5th kingdom here. And then let's talk about the next thing. So the next thing that factors into why the leaderboards will reflect the way they do is because alliances want to try and progress in the kingdom. They want to be able to make it to zone 2. They want to make it to zone 3, right? They want to participate and contribute in KVK for the most part. But even before then, players want to play the game. And playing the game means advancing and progressing into farther zones to get access to more resources, more structures, and that's something that everyone pretty much wants to. And more importantly than that, everybody, again, key word here, they want. Everyone wants to, regardless if they may be deserving of. When you think about, how maybe, like, for example, you may not think that a ranked 50 alliance in your kingdom, should probably deserve a shrine in Zone 2, but that doesn't mean they don't think that. And so that's another thing that factors into how anything from your world chat can, form any kind of narrative that they want if you have enough people that are singing the same tune, regardless of how right or not it may be. These are things that can happen. So when we're looking at how to factor into these, or I should say what factors into these areas that contribute to us kind of going down this path, those are just some of them. And or I should say some additionals. Then you look at this kingdom, right, where you got 345, right, so about 200 mil gap, a little bit wider here in the margins between 1 and 6, if we're just, again, kind of limitedly doing it there. Now we're going to look at the 6th kingdom for 82. And again, you're going to notice, as you probably are already, a pretty consistent trend. And this is, again, I think important to show this information off, so that way players out there have a good idea on what to actually expect when you're playing RoK, and then how and we're going to give some solutions here at the end on what you can do to combat this and how it can help your kingdom as a whole. So now we'll look here at 82, and you'll notice same thing, right? 200 mil gap, close from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 2, but again, not necessarily in overall. When we're looking from 1 to 6 top down. So we got 2 more. Now we're going to look at number 7 kingdom here at 83. Then we'll take a look at 84, and we should be good. So the next thing we'll touch on is when, in order to, something else that factors in is the fact that nobody knows what another does not know. Like we talked about before, where leaders have to really kind of reach out to each other. In addition to that, more often than not, what usually happens is because no one really reaches out to each other, there's typically sparks that will occur. So you'll have players or alliances that'll just say, okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and build this way, and I'm going to burn this flag, or I'm going to, start burning this flag. Players come in, okay, now we're attacking players all of a sudden. And a lot of that happens because, again, no one's really communicating with one another, where they are not reaching out beforehand to try and say, hey, can we work something out? Or you'll have some players that just come in and they think it's a war game, and they'll start attacking people right away. That's another way on how you kind of cause rifts, and how that can even factor in a smaller sense to players that may join certain alliances, or may merge into certain alliances, or maybe go under the banner of certain alliances, right? And usually, more often than not, it's the top alliances that they'll try and do that with. So now we'll look at 83. And you can see 369, 157, right? Again, 210, 212 mil of a gap. Let me see anything close. Okay, so 4 and 5 are pretty much the closest right now. But again, you're still noticing the same exact trend. So we're going to look at the last kingdom now, and then I'm going to provide some solutions and what I think are some good resolutions for how to solve this, along with how it will help your kingdom in the long run, and I'm sure RoK for its bottom line. And then we will touch on that. Okay. So we are going in here to the last kingdom, and we're going to go ahead and open up this right now. And then we will be able to see here when we're looking 480, 180. This is 300 mil difference here from 1 to 6. Closest ones is 2, 3, maybe 4, 5. 5, 6 is probably closer than 4, 5. It looks like. So again, you're running into the exact same thing. And now let me briefly talk about some things that I believe are some good ways on how some of these things can kind of be called when it comes to how to create a more sustainable kingdom. As we talked about before, the most important thing is player activity, player retention, and then passively from that, balancing out alliances. When you have alliances that are more balanced in the game, players are more engaged, they're more active, they're contributing more, and they are probably more socially active as well. Because now you're allowing players in the kingdom to feel as though, man, any alliance in the top 10 can win an AVA event. Everyone's contributing equally. There's not a herding of or piling of spenders in one alliance over another. And players feel as though they're now going to get more out of the kingdom because because now their contributions, and which will lead to them over investing. Right now they're willing to spend resources and spend more time on alliance versus alliance events where they're competing with others in a friendly competition type environment. That also stimulates more activity in the long term, which means you'll get more player conversion from the home kingdom into KVK. More players are willing to be active when the kingdom is healthy, morale is high, and players are engaged beyond whatever the average amount typically is for a kingdom. And how this helps RoK's bottom line is because if more kingdoms are active and you're keeping more players in the game, meaning player retention is higher in your kingdom, that means that less players are leaving, possibly less players are quitting, definitely less players are quitting the game overall. And because they're having a better experience when they come in from day one, that helps RoK retain more players and potentially make more money. So it's funny how it all kind of ties in. And if anything, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It is a little bit longer, but it is what I feel really was needed to properly explain how every kingdom that starts is impacted by this kind of default trajectory that they're already going down without knowing it, how it factors into whether or not your kingdom can be sustainable or not, providing some solutions and what I think are good ways to combat this, and then how it also helps out RoK in the end. So now, with all of that being said, I would love to know what you guys think. So please feel free, if you have any thoughts, any comments, you agree, you disagree, you think maybe there's other ways that can be combated and helped it. Because remember, these are things that we can control and we can do in-game. These are not things that RoK has to do or has to create a new feature or change something in order to happen, even though that could be something as well. This is mainly focusing on how we as players and how a kingdom can affect that change through kind of our own hands, right, our own means. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know anything and everything in the comments down below. That's it for me. Until next time, I'll catch you later.